Hey, it's Sean. Good to be with you again. Happy Thursday. Another great conversation in store for you. This time with another one of the amazing White House press secretary group. Ari Fleischer, from the previous episodes, was one of my predecessors. Well, guess what? Now we've got a successor. Sarah Huckabee Sanders was obviously the successor to me as White House press secretary. And the thing that's so interesting is that she is in a very interesting position as she's gone from being a staffer on a ton of campaigns to now being a principal, as a candidate for a governor. And well, let's face it, she will be the next governor. And I asked her about that. What was it like to going from staffing somebody to suddenly being the person that gets staffed, and how has that changed for her, and what's it been like? Talk about growing up as the daughter of a politician, getting thrown right into politics and living in the governor's mansion when you're in high school. How much fun that had to be. And then what it's like for her kids right now, how she's dealing with that. A lot of the traits she's looking for as she probably has to put together a team, not just for her campaign, but obviously then as governor, what's she looking for in people? What does she want to hire people? What were her memories from the White House, her interactions with the press? A lot of really interesting stuff. And then, as you guys know, I always am a huge fan of the lightning round. And I think you really get to know somebody. And she shocked me in terms of, I love the phone and the email question are two of my favorites. I think that really tells you about somebody. And you'll have to wait to see at the end. And obviously, what show is she going to go on? Is she going to do a reality television show? I think she really wants to do Dancing with the Stars. We're going to have to wait to the end to find out. Anyway, without further ado, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. All right, I want to welcome to the program a good friend, a former colleague, and the next governor of Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Always good to catch up with a friend.
Yeah. The thing that I think we got a lot to get to today. The thing that I think is fascinating about where you are is you like a lot in a lot of ways. My career started as a staffer, campaign manager, and now you're the principal. You're the candidate and will be the governor. What has the transition been like? That's different for someone who's used to being the staffer and getting the principal ready and thinking of all those things to now being staffed and having to maybe let some of those things go that you would normally be the one getting it ready for. How's that dynamic been for you?
We're supposed to let things go. I thought we were still supposed to get to Kentucky.
Exactly. I have that problem too.
Much to my team's disappointment, I have trouble sometimes letting those things go. And to be clear, I actually staffed you at one time. I worked for you for a good bit there at the White House. And, one of the things that I think is helpful actually in the process is, because in many ways, I have done every job on a campaign. I'm not asking anybody to do something I haven't done myself. And so I've been the driver. I've been the sign assembly person. I have made donor calls. I've staffed events. I've done kind of all of the other pieces, worked on the policy side. And so I feel like I have a very good understanding of all the different components and how they work together on a campaign, which gives me a bit of a different perspective. I have to say being on the principal side is pretty fun. And you get to dabble in the middle of those things when you want to, but then when you decide you don't want to, you don't do it, right. which my team would probably prefer that I dabble a lot less. That's probably one of the downsides, is that because I do have a background on the campaign side, I like to be involved in like a lot of the day-to-day things. And sometimes it's hard to break away from that, but we're having an amazing time on the campaign. I have a really great team and everyone works very well together. One of the things that certainly was the case on some of the earliest campaigns I worked on with my dad is it's very much kind of a family, and right. You get very close very quickly. It's one of the things I love about sort of the campaign world, but also serving in government. I mean, it's that way in the White House as well. And so we have a really amazing group that functions a lot like a family. And I think that's pretty special, and something I really like about the role that I'm in now.
Yeah, you mentioned your dad's campaign, and it's interesting. It's because I think a couple things. One, people tend to separate life in terms of like early career and early life, and for you jumped into the family business early, at like 10 years old when I was reading your book on your dad's first campaign. He goes on to be governor. The thing that was interesting is in reading your book and thinking about your early life, you're in high school and you're moving into the governor's mansion. And I kind of think to myself, what was it like as a high schooler during those years that I think can sometimes be awkward, sometimes can be fun, sometimes can be crazy, to be moving into the governor's mansion, having your dad be the governor at a time when a lot of kids are starting to have a little bit of fun. And by the way, he's also an ordained minister, so that's a little bit of a add that to that.
Yeah, people were just literally waiting on you to screw up and get in trouble so that they could write about it. I think I was the only person in my senior class who participated in Skip Day, and I got covered by the statewide newspaper. So there were certainly some different dynamics as a teenager. And when my dad first got elected, he wasn't even elected when he first became governor, but when he first became governor, Arkansas was a very Democrat heavy state. I mean, we had a more lopsided legislature than Massachusetts or Vermont. And so he wasn't extremely popular. And we moved into the capital city in Little Rock when I was 13, going into my freshman year of high school. So it was not exactly a time you want to move. You're going to a place where people really aren't that excited to see you, and you don't know anyone. And those first few weeks and months were pretty difficult. But I made some amazing friends shortly after, and I learned to love a lot of things about the process, so much so that now I'm following in my dad's footsteps. But it also gives me a great perspective as a mom myself to what my kids are going through and how best to help them kind of through this process and make it as easy and normal as possible in the campaign, which, having in a different way been very public yourself can be really challenging for kids. And so we try to make it as easy and normal as possible, while at the same time including them a lot in what we do.
Yeah, I see a lot. I want to get to that in a minute because I see a lot of that on Instagram. I want to talk about that. But you mentioned your political background. I mean, you worked on the Bush re-election in 2004. You obviously worked on your dad's campaign for president in 2008. John Bozeman's campaign for U.S. Senate down there in Arkansas. Tim Pawlenty's campaign in 2012. Tom Cotton, the U.S. Senator from Arkansas in 2014. And then your dad's campaign again in 2016. And then obviously President Trump's campaign. And in those campaigns, you've had a lot of different roles: field director, political director, senior advisor, comms, campaign manager. You mentioned, the early years of putting up signs. In all those campaigns and those different roles, as you now see yourself as this candidate, is there a campaign or a candidate that changed the trajectory or made an impression on you that you look back on now and say, okay, I'm a good candidate now because of that event, that job, that candidate?
For me, it's probably a little bit of a loaded question because I have worked on so many of my dad's campaigns, and he's been so influential in my life, both personally and professionally. And so far and away, the experience I've had working with and for him has changed my trajectory. I think the 2008 campaign, when he ran for president, was probably one that I learned the most on. We had such a small ragtag team, and to run a national campaign with, I think our team now is about equivalent in my governor's race to what my dad had running for president in 2008. And so you got exposed to every aspect of the campaign, and you really got to be in the middle of it. And I got to do all of that with my dad. And that is and was such a remarkable, incredible experience. We didn't win the race, but I did get a husband out of the deal. And so the 2008 campaign was a life-changing experience in a lot of ways for us, and was the kickoff to probably the biggest, most important journey of my life, and that's my marriage to Brian and the beginning of our family. And so for me, that has shaped so much of my adulthood, would be that 2008 race.
That makes a lot of sense. The husband part, definitely.
Yeah.
So the thing that's interesting is your dad is one of my favorite people in the world. The way he conducts himself, both as a candidate back then and now as a TV host. I got to imagine you, as you've kind of alluded to, you've taken a lot from him. Conversely, President Trump, I think, is a very different kind of candidate. When you look at their two styles, what sort of, as a candidate now, do you take from each of them?
It's interesting. They have such completely different approaches in many ways. But one thing that they have that's very similar is that they're both kind of a take what you get. My dad probably does that with a little bit more diplomacy sometimes than the president, but they're very much like, I am who I am, and I'm going to be myself. And I think that is probably one of the biggest takeaways that certainly I got from both of them, but just politics in general. The electorate is very smart, and they can spot a phony from a mile away. And so I think it's so important to be yourself, to be genuine, and not to try to reinvent yourself when you run for office. And I think that is a mistake that a lot of candidates make, but it's certainly something both of them, I think, have mastered and never apologized for. And I would certainly say it's something I've learned from each of them, and maybe just how you do that can sometimes matter too.
And I want to touch on that because, as you may have read, there were a couple times that I stepped in it as press secretary. I don't,
yeah,
we don't.
We both, I think, had our fair share of moments.
Well, so that's what I want to ask you. And I mean, and there were plenty of times when I said things that I was like, oh my God, I didn't mean to offend anybody. I mean, it's very difficult, especially as a Christian. You're like, wow, I didn't mean that to come out that way. And there was an event that you talk about in your book where then candidate Biden responded to a tweet of yours where you made the point that he was saying something and you made fun of him. And then he responds about stuttering. And he'd been talking about how he struggled with his whole life, and you immediately apologized. You were actually really quick to do that and saying that wasn't your point. You didn't know that personally. You never wanted to be personal, and you weren't trying to be mean about it. But it doesn't seem like the left and a lot of the folks in the media ever gave you the space to apologize. But there's this big division between how they treat people on the right who screw up and people who treat the people on the left who screw up, right?
For sure. I mean, if you make the tiniest, mistake in anything, as you know well, and as we both experience when you're talking nonstop, in the way that you do as a press secretary or in politics, you may have one of those moments. And there's no room for error for anybody on the right. I used to always say the greatest war I see is the war on conservative women, because anytime you say or do anything they don't like, frankly, you don't even have to make a mistake. You can just say something they don't like, and they come after you in such an aggressive manner. I'm not going to say that there aren't moments where people on the right do the same thing. And I try to remind them that we didn't like it when those things were done. Let's be the better person in the process. I think we go after the differences on policy and even the differences maybe in the approach, but the personal attacks, I think it's one of the biggest negatives in politics, and the more we can get away from that, I think the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, I agree. I touched on this a second ago. You brought it up. You when you were in the White House, you had a lot of interactions with your kids, bringing them to events, posting on that. And obviously now as the governor, it's a lot different. It's a very public position. People want to see you, your husband, Brian, your kids. That's kind of I think there's an expectation of that. They are young. how do you manage that balance of privacy, that making sure that they're not in that spotlight, that you don't put them in positions where maybe people, attack them or say mean things about them, but where's that line that you and Brian try to figure out how to draw?
It can be challenging because, certainly your parental instinct is to protect your kids. At the same time, I want my kids to understand why we're doing this, why we're running, why we are engaged in public service at all. And for me as a kid, the best way that I understood it was because my parents took me with them and showed me firsthand. And I want my kids to have that same experience. I don't want them to be left out of this monumental thing that we're in the middle of. And I want them very much to be part of it. I value their opinion and their interest in being part of what we're doing. And the best way that they can understand it all is to do it and to see it. And so I try to take them with me a pretty decent amount. I make the joke that I taking all three of them can sometimes be disastrous. And so I usually split them up and try to take them one at a time, because otherwise the event may not be able to handle all three of our kids at one time. And so I spread it out. One, it gives me some one-on-one time with my kids, doing something that is important to our family. But then also it allows them to really see kind of the political process and why our family is making the sacrifice to serve, like why we go through the nastiness and the bitterness. And that's because we feel very strongly that we can help change our state and that we can do good things to help people across the state of Arkansas. And I want them to see that and know it and be part of it. And so we take them as much as we can.
You talk in your book about a trip that you took over to see the troops. I think it was in over on Thanksgiving, and that you had to kind of leave your family on Thanksgiving, and that was one trip you couldn't take. I get asked this all the time when I do speaking events. What was the one event that maybe that you really enjoyed bringing your children to at the White House, or your family to? What was that? I always found that those were the fun events when you could bring people to stuff, because I always hated explaining to people what they missed out on. I always like being able to say, hey, why don't you come and enjoy it? Is there an event that sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, one of my favorite pictures, and certainly just kind of a cool thing at the White House is Halloween. One, because it's completely non-political and it's truly just meant for fun and for kids to come out there and have a good time. And they get to be all dressed up in their costumes. And it's pretty amazing that you have all these kids running around the White House grounds and trick-or-treating at White House offices in full costume. And I have this incredible picture of my kids in the Oval Office in their Halloween costumes, high-fiving the president. And that's one of those memories that you can never replicate and is just such a special and cool experience. And even though my kids were pretty young, they get to look back and see that and know that they were a part of history and in one of the most historic, powerful places, I mean, literally in the entire world. And to stand there and do that in a Batman costume is pretty cool.
Was that you in the Batman costume or them?
That was you, Sean. You were in the background in the Batman. No, I'm kidding. Both boys were Batman because we couldn't decide to do a different one. So we had two Batmans.
Let me ask you this. When I mentioned this earlier, you've been a staffer, you're now the principal. When you go to hire people right now, what's the biggest quality that you want in somebody?
Look, I think that kind of genuine nature about somebody is so important. I don't have to agree with somebody on every single thing, but I do want to understand who they are and what they're about. And I think that's, whether you're in politics or anything else, I think that's such an important quality.
Yeah, no, that makes, I think that, and that goes back to, I think, what you were talking about with your dad. One more thing on this, your relationship, obviously as press secretary, and I know this full well, was a little contentious for both of us with the press corps. We're dealing with people who didn't like President Trump, and but how has that been now as a candidate talking to mostly the Arkansas press. Is there any difference in how your relationship with the press is different now as both a principal and also with a press corps that's more focused on Arkansas and Arkansas issues?
I think the biggest difference is now, and not to steal my own title of my book, but I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking on someone else's behalf, and it gives you, a lot more freedom and a lot more liberty in how and what you're saying, because it's my positions, my opinions that I am exchanging when I talk to the press versus when you're in the role that you and I shared at the White House. You're speaking on somebody else's behalf, and I think that's probably the biggest difference for me. Is that now this is about the positions and the policies I'm trying to implement here in the state of Arkansas versus trying to do that on somebody else's behalf.
Yeah, I agree. Sarah, we always end the podcast with a quick lightning round. You ready?
I hope so.
Now, this isn't like Jim Acosta stuff. This is all right.
Good.
You ready?
I can hang up on you, Sean. Yeah.
All right. When you're traveling, are you the kind of person that arrives early or just in time?
Just in time.
How low can you let your phone battery go?
Ooh, down to like 1 or 2%, but only if I have no other option.
Oh God. How many unread emails do you currently have?
Just under 100,000.
Yeah, most of those are mine. If you had 48 hours off the campaign trail, what show would you binge?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I've been into some of the survival show Alone lately, so maybe I would binge watch that one.
All right. Knowing that you have 3 kids, this is a tough one. How clean do you keep your house?
My common areas have to be clean or I can't function. Okay. But my kids' rooms are a little bit more of a coin flip.
Least favorite chore?
Ooh, laundry.
Who's the coolest celebrity that you've ever met?
Oh, that's a tough one. Can I come back to that one? I got to think about it for a minute.
If you could have a drink with someone you've never met before, who would it be?
Dead or alive?
Sure.
Winston Churchill.
Okay. Biggest pet peeve?
Like a clicking, ticking noise, like a constant sound drives me crazy. If somebody has a clicking pen in a meeting, I almost have to stop the meeting before we can move on.
What was that? Okay. All right. What's something that Sarah Sanders won't go cheap on?
Maybe like a good handbag.
Okay. All right. Last one. I did my reality TV show. What TV show would you go on when you're done with being governor?
I don't really have like a singing, dancing talent like yourself. And I don't look good in chartreuse lime green. So I'd probably have to take Dancing with the Stars off the list.
Okay.
But I think I'd be fun to be like maybe in a drama series or something.
I think. What about the baking? I saw you did do the pies.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I think I could get into like a master chef or something, but yeah. I don't have quite the skill set, so I'd need some practice before I jumped into that
right.
deep
end. We do 5 quick words and then we're done. Ready? Do you say data or data?
Data.
Gala or gala?
Gala.
Iran or Iran?
Iran.
Caramel or caramel?
Caramel.
Aunt or aunt?
Aunt.
Sarah Sanders, thank you for sharing your time with us. I know, hopefully this went better than any briefing you ever had. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, I'm glad we covered some of those really deep questions there at the end that I feel like the voters really need to know.
Well, you know what? This could be. You could see all of this in a new opposition research attack ads coming your way soon.
I'm sure.
Is on it.
And I did want to come back to that celebrity. I'm going to go with Sam Pittman. He's the coach of the Razorbacks, one of my favorite people, doing a phenomenal job.
All right, good. That's very smart of you. Always stay focused on Arkansas. Sarah Sanders, I know your time is tight. I appreciate your friendship and your generosity for today.
Thanks, Sean. Great to talk to you.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I certainly did. It was great to get together with Sarah. We're at the 80-something day before the election, the midterm elections, and then she will be governor-elect. My goodness, she went from being my deputy to the governor, and you think about it, I mean, Bill Clinton ran for governor from Arkansas. Her dad ran for president from Arkansas. Her dad ran for president. So who knows? I mean, she may be running for president someday soon, and you guys are going to be like, wow, I listened to Sean talk about this in this podcast. We're going to save and go back, and this will be part of history. Anyway, I love the conversation. She's so fun and relatable. I think that's the thing. It was fun when she answered the question about what it was like with kind of people she's looking for. And it's true of her dad and her. It's two people that I think, genuine. They're fun to be around, good people. I've already wanted I'm going to have some space between her and her dad, but he is a great guy. I love going on his show. I've loved getting to know him over the last decade or so. And I wanted to have a conversation with him because he's had such a great and unique life and evolution in politics. So that's going to come up, but we'll space out the Huckabee family. But that'll be coming up. So anyway, obviously a lot of big news in politics going down. That big Cheney loss. Holy smokes. I mean, I thought 25 points would be a big loss for her, almost a 40-point loss. I think we'll probably end up talking about that a little bit more on the Monday edition because this really put the wind back in the sails of folks. So we'll break that down. And a few things going on in that Alaska primary. Next week, we've got more primaries in Florida. We'll talk about that a little bit too. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so. The reviews, they put food on the table, let's be honest. And inflation, interest rates, they're both going up. So you know how important that is. Appreciate you sharing this podcast with everyone. And I look forward to seeing you on Monday. Thanks a lot. I'll see you next edition of Beyond the Briefing.